Hi, this is Mo from Smart Training 365. All exercises have a different resistance curve depending on the source of the resistance and your body's position in relation to the direction of resistance. More importantly, for optimal muscle development, not all resistance curves are equally productive nor equally safe. In this video, you're going to discover that there are various types of resistance that play a role in resistance exercise, and they each have a unique set of characteristics associated with them. Without understanding these characteristics, it is impossible to accurately identify the resistance curve of an exercise. This will lead to blindly select exercises that are inefficient for your goal, causing you a lot of wasted time and energy. Make sure to save this video as you might need to watch it a few times. Now, let's get started. The resistance curve is a term which refers to the sequential variation of resistance that occur through a range of motion as the limb travels through the arc of a given exercise. Specifically, it identifies where in the range of motion the resistance is more, most, less, and least. Let's look at a pendulum, for example. It has a pivot, an arm, and a weight, which is sometimes called a bob. Let's suppose this pendulum has not been moved, it's just hanging there motionless. It is effortlessly maintained in its vertical position, balanced under its pivot. The reason why it's easily maintained in that position is because a lever that is parallel with the direction of resistance is neutral. This position could also be called the zero position, and it could also be called the base. I talked about this in the 16 biomechanical factors video. The base position is the lowest point in the lower half of a circle. It is also the position which has its bob closest to the source of resistance, which in this case is gravity. For the sake of analysis, let's say that the weight on the end of this lever is 10 pounds and of the lever arm is 12 inches. When this lever arm becomes fully active, meaning perpendicular with gravity, it will have a magnification of 12:1. If we were to pull this pendulum to the left with a force that is perpendicular to the lever arm, we would be pulling it with a mechanical advantage. We'll move this lever to a position that is halfway between the vertical position and the horizontal position to a 45-degree angle. As you know, the horizontal position is the 100% active position. We are now halfway between vertical and horizontal position. So we are going to call this the 50% position, although a trigonometry calculation would reveal a slightly different number. Please know that the purpose of this video is to gain a broad understanding of resistance exercise. It's not to learn trigonometry. We have already defined available resistance as the net amount of load that is produced by the weight being held, meaning attached to the end of the lever, plus the magnification produced by the length of the lever. Now our goal is to determine what percentage of that will be loaded into the muscle based on the position of its lever. If the lever, your forearm for example, is parallel with gravity, your biceps would get 0% of the available resistance. If the lever is fully active, meaning perpendicular with gravity, your biceps would get 100% of the available resistance. If it's halfway between vertical 0 or horizontal 100%, your biceps would get approximately 50% of the available resistance. Again, this is very simplified because mechanical disadvantage also affects the load that is placed on the biceps. Our purpose here is only to examine the angle of the lever relative to the direction of resistance. This is the 100% position, perpendicular with gravity. We are now back to the 112-pound force requirement to hold the lever arm at this angle. We then move the arm to a 45-degree angle, but on the upper half of the sphere. Here again, we are halfway between the horizontal and vertical position. So the force required to hold the lever arm at this angle, approximately 66 pounds, which is 50% of the maximum position. It does not matter whether the lever is on the upper half or the lower half of the circle. A 45-degree angle is the same in either case. The reason for this is that the force required is based on the distance from the weight to the pivot. With vertical lines drawn, that distance is the same regardless of which half of the circle, upper or lower, the lever is. In the illustration, focus your attention on the bob, labeled 1 and 2. As you can see by the pale blue line drawn through them, their distance from the pivot, identified by the dotted vertical line, is the same. Distance A is the same as distance B. This distance is technically called the moment arm. Each position would have the same amount of downward force, assuming no momentum has been added because they have the same moment arm. Now we have moved the lever arm to the neutral position that is on the upper half. This position is called the apex. It is characterized as being the highest part of the arc. It is the neutral position that is farthest away from the source of resistance. The lever is in zero position again because it is balanced over the pivot. This is the resistance curve, the sequential variations of resistance that occur through an arc. As the lever moves through the different angles between parallel with resistance and perpendicular to it. When the lever is 25% between parallel and perpendicular, the force required to hold the lever at that position is approximately 25% of what that force requirement would be when the lever is at 100%, all other factors being equal. Once again, our purpose here is not to teach trigonometry, which is what we would be used to calculate these sorts of vectors if our goal was to be exact. But that's not our goal. Our purpose here is to gain a broad understanding of the sequential changes in resistance that occur in resistance exercises as lever moves through various angles of resistance. For example, although the two exercises here utilize the same type of bench, the same seated position on that bench, and the same moment, each of the two exercises are utilizing a different source of resistance and each behave differently. One involves free weight gravity, which always pulls straight downward, creating parallel lines of resistance as the forearm moves through its arc. The other involves a cable, which always pulls toward the pulley, creating fan-shaped lines of resistance as the forearm moves through its arc. One of the exercises above is very good, meaning optimally productive and safe. The other is less productive and less safe. We'll know which is which soon enough. There are at least 8 types of resistance typically used in a resistance exercise. And for the most part, they each create a unique resistance curve because they each provide a different direction of resistance. Free weight gravity like dumbbells, barbell, and body weight exercises like chin-ups, push-ups, parallel bar dips, TRX, etc. usually result in a resistance curve that is precisely like that of the pendulum I described at the beginning of the video. The reason for this is that free weight resistance always results in a straight down direction of resistance. We cannot see gravity, of course, but we know that it always pulls straight down. This is why we use a plumb line to determine what is vertical when constructing a building or other structure. At any point in this range of motion of an exercise, we can imagine a vertical arrow pointing straight down from wherever the weight is. Therefore, a horizontal limb will always be perpendicular with resistance when dealing with free weight gravity because gravity is always vertical. Cables produce a direction of resistance that follows the angle of the cable. So if the cable is pulling to the left horizontally rather than straight down, the resistance curve will not be measured the way it would be a pendulum. A cable redirects the direction of gravity. For example, it may come from above like a lat pull down because that's where the pulley is. A lever that is perpendicular with the cable would be 100% lever. In the lat pull downs, we can see that the weight stack on the machine is being pulled downward by gravity. However, the cable redirects the direction of resistance to the user of the machine such that it creates an upward direction of resistance for him, against which he must pull downward. Therefore, the direction in which the cable is pulling would be used to identify the resistance curve. Elastic bands are similar to cables in the sense that the direction of resistance is coming from the location of its origin. However, unlike cables, the resistance that is provided by elastic bands is not consistent. It increases as the band is stretched farther. Elastic bands are convenient, of course. They are lightweight and very portable, so they allow a person to do type of resistance exercise wherever they happen to be. However, they are not ideal from the perspective of muscle development. Muscles have a strength curve which usually allows them to be stronger when they are elongated and less strong when they are contracted. The resistance curve of an exercise should ideally accommodate the strength curve of the target muscle. Elastic bands do the opposite. They load the muscle less when the muscle is elongated, then they load the muscle more as the muscle is shortened. This is an unfortunate aspect of using elastic bands as the resistance. Machines that have a circular cam provides an even, non-varying amount of resistance throughout the entire range of motion of a given exercise. An example of this type of machine would be the multi-hip machine, with a cam that is perfectly circular rather than oblong. This causes the cable that is riding on that cam to always be the same distance from the cam's center. This results in an unchanged level resistance regardless of where the person's limb is in the range of motion. Now let's talk about machines that have an oblong cam. This concept was first introduced by Arthur Jones, the inventor of the original knotless machine. In fact, the logo of his brand was a knotless seashell because it has an oblong shape. With this type of machine, the resistance increases when the cable rides along the wider part of the cam, and it decreases when the cable rides along the shorter part of the cam. Arthur Jones' theory was that if a machine's resistance curve matched the strength curve of a target muscle, it would be more effective at developing that muscle. Theoretically, that is correct. However, sometimes the resistance curve of a particular knotless machine did not match the strength curve of the target muscle. Other times, it neglected to account for any mechanical disadvantage that may be occurring in that particular muscle. Lastly, not all knotless machines' movements were anatomically ideal, meaning they did not match the ideal motion of a given muscle. In short, knotless machine did not really revolutionize the gym equipment industry as much as some people expected they might. They did not build muscle any better than most other methods of resistance exercise, and they did not always feel anatomically correct. Some knotless machines, however, were very well designed. Resistance machines are especially popular among people who are unfamiliar with exercise because they are easy to use. However, from the perspective of optimal physique development, they are usually not quite as good as the equivalent exercise performed with either dumbbells or cable. Generally speaking, leg extension and leg curls are two notable exceptions because it's impossible to grip anything with our feet the way we can with our hands. Incorrect height or limb length settings and improper body position on the machine diminishes their effectiveness. With this type of machine, plates are loaded onto a lever arm on the machine. Therefore, instead of using one's own limb, a forearm for example, as a reference for where it crosses perpendicularly with gravity, the lever arm of the machine would be used to identify where it crosses gravity perpendicularly. Of course, the angle of the machine's lever may or may not be designed properly, meaning that it might create an ideal or a compromised resistance curve. We cannot assume that all machines are designed properly. Nevertheless, this lever-loaded concept is generally good provided it is designed correctly. Here, notice that the weight is loaded onto my lever arm behind me. The angle demonstrated at this precise moment is that the lever arm is rising from maximally active position, meaning perpendicular with gravity, so the resistance is diminishing as the lat muscles contract. This is generally good, although the particular movement is less than ideal as explained in the 16 biomechanical factor video. In this exercise, we see that the weight is loaded into the lever arm that is at a different angle than that of the user's forearm. This is good because of the mechanical disadvantage that occurs in the bicep during this movement. We want the resistance to diminish some when the elbow is almost straight, since the disadvantage will automatically increase the force requirement. The particular resistance curve shown here is not quite perfect, but it's fairly good. It would be better if the machine's weight-bearing arm was more vertical when the elbow is fully extended. Machines that carry the weight on a sled or carriage rather than moving a weight through an arc. These machines move resistance through a straight line, but usually at an angle. Example of this would be the 45-degree leg press and the angled Smith machine. With this type of machine, the direction of resistance is the same as the sled's line of travel, parallel with the guide rods of the machine. Any limb that crosses perpendicularly with that direction of resistance would be working as a 100% lever, and any limb that is parallel with that direction of resistance would be a neutral or nearly neutral lever. In the leg press, the tibia are nearly parallel with the machine's guide rods. Therefore, the muscle which operates the tibia, meaning the quads, will not get a large percentage of the load. The femur is more perpendicular with the direction of resistance as compared to the tibia, so the glutes will be more loaded than the quads. One thing that should be noted with this angle type of machine is that the actual amount of weight that is on the machine is not the amount that loaded onto your body. This is because the pathway of the sled is not vertical, it is diagonal. Therefore, the amount of weight that is on the machine is reduced by a percentage relative to the degree of the angle. The more horizontal the angle of the machine, the lesser the percentage of the load that will be loaded onto your body. The more vertical the angle of the machine is, the higher the percentage of load. Pilates is not usually considered a physique development type of exercise. However, there is still resistance at play here, and it follows the same rules. Similar to the cable and elastic bands, with Pilates reformer, we can see the line of pull. It is the rope coming from the pulley. That is the first clue as what the resistance curve will be during all the various exercises typically performed on a reformer. One of the problems with the resistance provided by a Pilates reformer is that it does not offer any option for directional changes. The exercises that are designed to be used on a Pilates reformer are meant to accommodate the design of the machine. In fact, a machine should accommodate the ideal anatomical motions of the human body. The human body has a multitude of anatomical motion, and the reformer cannot accommodate all those directional requirements. It's true that many of the exercises typically performed on a reformer do provide some degree of benefit. However, compared with other exercise alternatives, the directions of resistance offered by a reformer are limited. It mostly fails to provide the ideal direction of resistance for all muscle groups of the human body. It does not mean that the resistance provided by a reformer has no value. It's just that it does not provide the ideal direction of resistance, and it does not provide the ideal resistance curve for optimal muscle development. I'm doing an abdominal crunch on the floor. In the starting position, my spine, which is the operating lever of the abs, is at the horizontal position. In the crunch position, my spine has curled to approximately a 15-degree angle. Most of us know that this exercise performed on the floor or other horizontal surfaces is fairly difficult. For some people, it's nearly impossible. But this depends on two factors: one's torso weight and one's abdominal strength. For the average person, doing this exercise this particular way on a flat surface is so difficult that it usually prohibits them from doing the exercise correctly. Ideally, a person should be able to move his torso from the spine straight position to the spine fully curled position when in the contracted position. But when a person weighs too much, or when his abdominal muscle is anything less than very strong, he simply cannot produce a full range of motion. It ends up being mostly a head and neck movement rather than a torso-spinal movement. The simple solution is to lessen the load by altering the resistance curve, as you can see here, the exact same movement performed at a slight inclined angle. This is just one example of how we can manipulate the resistance curve of an exercise, simply by changing the angle of the operating lever relative to the direction of resistance. As mentioned before, muscles have an elastic property. They typically have more strength potential when they are elongated and less strength potential when they are contracted. This is known as a muscle's natural strength curve. Therefore, it is most sensible to select exercises that provide a resistance curve which offers the target muscle more resistance during the early phase of the muscle's range of motion and less resistance at the end of the range of motion where the muscle is less strong. William Kramer, PhD, and Stephen Fleck explain a muscle strength curve this way. At the optimal length of a muscle fiber, there is potential for maximal cross-bridge interaction and thus maximal force. With excessive shortening, there is an overlap of actin filaments so that the actin filaments interfere with each other's ability to contract the myosin cross-bridges. Less cross-bridge contact with the active sites on the actin results in a smaller potential to develop tension. Here is an example during exercise A. The resistance curve is such that it loads the triceps more when the elbow is bent and the triceps is elongated, and loads it less when the arm is extended straight and the triceps is contracted. This matches the strength curve of the muscle. During the exercise B, the resistance curve is such that it provides zero load to the triceps when the elbow is bent and the triceps is elongated, and loads it the most when the arm is extended straight and the triceps is contracted. The resistance curve of the dumbbell triceps kickback is the opposite of the strength curve of the triceps muscle. As a result, the exercise feels too light in the early part of the range of motion, but then it feels too heavy at the end conclusion of the range of motion. I hope this video clarified the different types of resistance so that you can select the best exercises that build muscle efficiently and safely. You should save this video because there are a lot of information that I covered, and you may want to rewatch it a few times and take notes so that you know what to try and how to apply what you learned in your workout. More of this is explained in greater details in the Physics of Fitness online program and other factors that you should be aware of when selecting which exercises to use. If you're only interested in the 20 best exercises for each muscle of the body, then I recommend the Break 20 program. For more information, visit us at smarttraining365.com or email me at mo@smarttraining365.com. Thanks for watching. Take care.